You think you know dark history. You've heard about cruel kings, corrupt popes, even emperors who set cities on fire. But I promise you, nothing prepares you for this. This isn't just a story of war or tyranny. It's the story of a queen who believed that blood itself, warm, fresh, human blood, was the secret to eternal beauty. And it's not just myth. We have letters, testimonies, court records, and rumors that whisper the same chilling tale. She was beautiful, powerful, untouchable, and beneath the velvet robes and golden crown, she was hiding the darkest obsession of them all. This is the story of the queen who bathed in blood to keep her youth. The Mask of Beauty, imagine a glittering court. Silk gowns shimmering in candlelight, nobles whispering in galleries, musicians playing soft notes on lutes and harps. And at the center of it all, a queen, radiant, flawless, her skin pale and smooth as porcelain. Ambassadors who visited her court wrote admiringly of her poise. A Venetian diplomat once described her as a woman whose gaze commands silence, whose beauty disarms, and whose cruelty is yet only rumored. But the rumors, oh, the rumors, they never stopped. Behind the compliments were whispers. Servants swore they saw the queen spend hours in front of polished bronze mirrors, studying her own reflection, more like a sculptor inspecting a statue than a woman preparing for court. Physicians noted her paranoia about aging. One even recorded that she demanded special tonics, powders ground from pearls, elixirs distilled from rare herbs, even concoctions of mercury, which slowly poisoned the very skin she was desperate to preserve. But none of it satisfied her. None of it was enough. A terrifying belief. Now, let's pause, because here's where it gets worse. One story, perhaps the most infamous, comes from a servant's testimony, recorded years later. According to her, the queen once struck a maid in a fit of rage. The girl's nose bled onto the queen's hand, and as she wiped it away, she noticed something strange. The skin where the blood had touched looked fresher, younger, almost renewed. That tiny, horrifying observation would become the seed of an obsession. From that day, the queen became convinced that the very essence of youth was locked inside the human body, and only blood, warm and pure, could keep her beautiful forever. Court whispers. Of course, you have to ask, how did nobody stop her? The truth is, the royal court was a place where power silenced questions. When a queen demanded something, courtiers obeyed. And when girls began disappearing, peasant daughters brought to the castle with promises of work, noble maidens invited to serve as ladies-in-waiting, people whispered, yes, but they also stayed quiet. A Spanish diplomat wrote in one letter, "It is said the queen surrounds herself with young maidens, though none are ever seen again after they pass her threshold." The church murmured too. Priests warned of sin, vanity, unnatural obsession. But the queen was the monarch's wife, the kingdom's beating heart. Who would dare to accuse her openly? The first victims, the records, fragmentary as they are, begin to show patterns. In 1602, a physician named Johannes Austerlitz noted in his diary that he had been summoned to the palace to tend to a young maiden, pale and trembling. The girl was never seen again. In 1604, the steward of a nearby estate wrote of being ordered to send several village girls to the Queen's court for the purpose of service. And then there were the peasant stories, mothers weeping that their daughters had been taken, brothers swearing revenge. But against a queen, what could they do? The rumors spread faster than fire. But here's the thing about monarchy. It thrives on silence. So long as the queen appeared in court, radiant and untouchable, the machinery of power turned as it always had. But it gets worse. Because bathing in blood wasn't just a grotesque superstition. It became a ritual. Chroniclers later described entire chambers in her castle devoted to it. Great stone baths, iron chains bolted into walls, buckets kept ready. Whether these accounts were exaggerated or true, they fit the pattern of terror, described in testimonies decades later. One servant confessed under interrogation that she had been ordered to strip the clothes from young girls, hang them by their ankles, and drain their blood into basins, while the queen waited impatiently. Others described her walking into her bath as if into a fountain of youth, sighing with pleasure as the crimson liquid touched her skin. The silence of power. Imagine being a courtier, a servant, even a visiting diplomat. You hear the screams echoing through stone corridors. You see the pale faces of the maids, trembling, before they're summoned to the Queen's chamber. Do you speak out? Do. You risk your life, your family, your honor. Most didn't. Instead, they bowed lower, avoided her gaze, and prayed that their own daughters wouldn't be chosen next. The Venetian envoy again wrote, "Her Majesty grows more youthful as the years pass. It is a wonder of God, or a trick of the devil." Even in admiration there was suspicion, but suspicion alone could not topple a queen, not yet. Escalation. But here's where the story really takes shape. The queen wasn't content with just a few victims. No, her hunger grew. At first she targeted peasants, girls no one would miss, but soon, even noble families whispered that their daughters had vanished. This was dangerous, because peasant blood might be ignored by kings and priests, but noble blood, that shook dynasties. And with every new disappearance, the queen's glow only seemed to grow brighter. Ambassadors returning from court commented in letters that she seemed unchanged by time. As one French envoy put it, "She is a marvel of nature. 20 years have passed, yet she remains as though in her first youth." But behind those marvels were rivers of blood, and it was only a matter of time before the truth, or at least suspicion, could no longer be hidden. Imagine this. You're a servant in a royal palace. The corridors are cold, the walls are stone, and the shadows seem to swallow sound. The queen glides past you, radiant, untouchable. She doesn't look at you. She never does. But you hear the ae whispers. You hear the screams that vanish into the night. And you pray to God it won't be you or your sister summoned next. Because by now, the queen's obsession had become something far darker than vanity. It had become a system, a machine. The machinery of terror court records from the time reveals something chilling. The queen didn't act alone. She had a circle of trusted women, noble ladies, governesses, and servants, who became her accomplices. One name stands out again and again, a woman called Dorothea, sometimes referred to in surviving depositions as the hand that delivered the lambs to slaughter. It was Dorothea who lured peasant girls to the castle with promises of work. It was Dorothea who whispered reassurances to noble families that their daughters would be safe in the queen's care. And it was Dorothea who silenced screams when the queen's rituals began. Later interrogations describe her as cold, methodical, loyal beyond reason. A servant who had once worked under Dorothea testified, "She served her mistress as one serves God, without question, without fear, and without pity." This wasn't a queen acting in isolation. This was a court conspiracy. The first trial of blood letters from a royal physician revealed just how early the queen's experiments began. In 1606, he wrote to a colleague, "Her Majesty suffers from great anxiety about the withering of her beauty. She requests ever more extreme remedies. I fear her mind is unsettled, for she speaks of blood as though it were a balm." But the real turning point came when noble girls began to vanish. One story, preserved in a Hungarian chronicle, describes how a young noblewoman was sent to court as a companion for the queen. Within days, she was gone. When her family demanded answers, they were told she had fallen ill and died suddenly. But the family didn't believe it. Their letters, some still preserved, accused the queen of horrors unfit for Christian ears. This was the first crack in the mask, the first time nobles began to whisper the word murder, the ritual, and yet, the killings didn't stop. According to later testimony, the Queen developed a ritual. Victims were stripped, bound, and bled, sometimes into golden basins, sometimes into great stone tubs. One servant, whose confession survives in the court archives, claimed that the Queen would sometimes smear fresh blood directly onto her face, laughing as it dripped down her chin. Another swore she saw the Queen step into a steaming bath of blood while musicians played outside her chamber door, masking the sound of muffled screams. It's grotesque. It's unbelievable. And yet, too, many sources, from depositions to local legends, echo the same horrifying details. Was every word true, or was it exaggerated in the hysteria that followed? We may never know, but even if only half of it was real, the truth is monstrous. The glow of youth, and here's the most terrifying part. It seemed to work. Ambassadors continued to comment on the Queen's unnatural youth. Even in her 40s, she was described as appearing no older than 20. A papal nuncio wrote in 1610, "The Queen is a marvel. Her complexion is untouched by time, her face without wrinkle. It is said she has discovered the secret of eternal youth." Of course, he didn't know the price of that youth, but others did. Servants whispered, priests muttered, noble families began to fear, and in the villages, the people had a word for her. Not queen, not lady, but demon. Cracks in the crown, here's where it gets worse. The Queen's crimes weren't just grotesque, they were dangerous. Because every girl who vanished, every noble family who grieved, every rumor that spread, was a spark. And sparks, in a kingdom already plagued by war and unrest, could ignite a fire. By 1611, neighbouring lords began to take notice. Some refused to send their daughters to court. Others wrote letters directly to the king, warning him of his wife's unnatural practices. One letter, preserved in Vienna's archives, bluntly states, "If His Majesty will not govern, the Queen will govern us all through terror." That was the danger. Her obsession wasn't just personal, it threatened dynasties. And in an age where power rested on bloodlines, succession and alliances, nothing was more dangerous than a queen who turned blood into a weapon. The turning tide finally, the storm broke. In late 1611, a group of noble families, furious, grieving, terrified, petitioned the king directly. They demanded an investigation. At first, he resisted. Who would dare expose his queen? Who would dare bring such shame upon the throne? But the pressure grew. The church joined in. Priests thundered from pulpits that the queen was a witch, a Jezebel, a second Bathsheba. And then came the final straw. A noble family discovered their daughter's body, pale, drained, mutilated. And they swore vengeance. The king had no choice. He ordered an inquiry. The investigation. What followed was one of the most sensational investigations in royal history. Inspectors arrived at the castle. They interviewed servants. They examined chambers. What they claimed to find was beyond belief. Chains bolted into walls, iron maidens spattered with blood, secret passageways leading to hidden rooms. A priest who accompanied the investigators wrote, "It was a house of slaughter, a temple of Satan, hidden behind the veil of royalty." The servants were interrogated. Many broke under torture. Their confessions filled page after page. Descriptions of girls lured, imprisoned, bled, discarded. Numbers began to circulate. 30 victims, 50, 100. Some claimed as many as 600. Was it possible? Or was hysteria exaggerating the truth? We may never know, but even the lowest estimates make her one of the deadliest women in history. The Queen cornered. And yet, here's the strangest part. Even as the evidence piled up, even as witnesses confessed, even as bodies were said to be found, the Queen herself was untouchable, because she was royal. You see, in early modern Europe, a queen could not be tried like a peasant. Her blood was sacred, her body political. To accuse her openly was to shake the very foundation of monarchy. So the king faced a dilemma: expose her and risk scandal, rebellion, the collapse of alliances, or hide her and risk more blood, more whispers, more outrage. He chose a compromise. For see, Queen's accomplices would be tried, but the Queen herself, she would face judgment in a different way. The winter of 1611 was colder than anyone could remember, but inside the Queen's castle, the chill wasn't just from the snow, it was from fear, her servants whispered. Her guards glanced nervously at one another, and in the great hall, investigators spread out their parchments, reading aloud the accusations. The Queen, once radiant, untouchable, sat silent. Her face was pale, her eyes defiant. And now, the stage was set for one of the most infamous trials in royal history. The accomplices on trial. The first to fall were her accomplices. Dorothea, the woman who had lured so many victims, was dragged before the court. Witnesses testified she had hand-delivered girls to their deaths, had laughed as chains clattered, had silenced those who screamed too loudly. One servant described her chillingly. She was more cruel than the Queen, for she did the work with joy. When pressed under torture, Dorothea admitted everything. She confessed to organizing abductions, to assisting in the baths, to disposing of bodies in pits beneath the castle. Her sentence was death, and not a swift one. On a frigid morning, she was broken on the wheel, her bones shattered one by one before her body was displayed to the crowd. A warning, a spectacle. 2 other accomplices met similar fates. Some were burned alive, their ashes scattered. Others were decapitated and left on pikes. It was brutal. It was medieval justice. But the people demanded nothing less. But the Queen herself? Here's where the story turns strange. Because while her servants screamed on the scaffold, the Queen never stood in the dock. She was royalty. And royalty could not be seen dragged through the mud of public trial. The investigators had gathered mountains of testimony. They had described chambers of blood, tubs of gore, mutilated bodies. They had servants' confessions, priests' reports, letters from nobles. But to condemn a queen openly was unthinkable. So instead, a compromise was reached. The Queen would be sentenced in silence. The secret sentence. On January 1612, a royal decree was issued. The Queen would never again walk free. She was taken to her castle, not as mistress, but as prisoner. The great doors were shut, windows bricked over, guards posted at every entrance, and there, in a single cold chamber, she was sealed away, alive. Priest recorded, she was confined with neither servant nor company, only a slot through which food might be passed. The walls themselves became her jailers. Imagine it, the woman who had once bathed in blood to defy time, now trapped in darkness, cut off from light, from touch, from power. Day after day, month after month, year after year, the Queen in the dark. What happened in that cell, no one can say for certain. But fragments survive. A soldier who served as guard claimed she raved at night, screaming at unseen demons. Another swore he heard her weeping, begging for blood, begging for youth. One even said she smeared herself with her own wounds, as if still, clinging to the rituals that had once made her radiant. The records note her health declined. Her once smooth skin shriveled, her body wasted, her hair fell in clumps. The miracle of youth had abandoned her, and in its place was decay. The very thing she had feared most, age, devoured her in isolation. The horrifying revelation, 4 years, passed. Then, one morning in 1616, the guards opened her chamber slot and found silence. They forced open the bricked window. Inside, they discovered her body, withered, skeletal, barely recognizable. And here's the most chilling part. According to one priest's account, her corpse was surrounded by scraps of parchment. She had been writing in the dark, letters that no one had seen until her death. In those fragments, she scrawled the same words again and again. Blood is youth. Without blood, I am nothing. Her final testament, a confession, a curse. Legacy of horror. The castle was abandoned soon after. Peasants whispered that screams still echoed in its halls. Travelers claimed to see shadows in the windows. Some said blood seeped from the stones themselves. Historians argue to this day, were the numbers real? Did she kill 600 girls or 60? Was she a monster or the victim of political enemies who painted her as one? But here's the truth. Even if half the stories are exaggeration, the blood of innocence still stains her name. She became legend. The so-called Blood Queen. The model for vampire myths that haunted Europe for centuries. A reminder of what obsession and absolute power can do. Reflection, and that's the lesson here. Monarchy was meant to project divinity, beauty, and stability. But behind the crowns and jewels, it could hide rot. It could hide monsters. This queen's story isn't just about one woman's vanity. It's about what happens when power shields cruelty, when fear silences truth, when a throne becomes a slaughterhouse. The queen was gone. Her castle locked. Her name whispered with dread. But her story was only beginning. Because death did not end her legend. In many ways, it made her immortal. Myth spreads like fire. Peasants told the tale at hearthfires. Pilgrims carried it across borders. Priests thundered about it in sermons, warning against vanity and sin. Soon, every kingdom in Europe knew of the queen who bathed in blood. And here's where it gets fascinating. Her story was twisted, reshaped, and exaggerated. Some said she bathed in blood every full moon. Others swore she slept in coffins or drank directly from the throats of her victims. She was no longer just a noble woman. She was a demon in human skin. In Germany, pamphlets described her as a vampire. In France, playwrights staged her as a sorceress. In Hungary, mothers frightened their children. Obey, or the Blood Queen will come for you. The scandal became folklore. Folklore became myth. Myth became horror. Was any of it true? And here's where historians step in. The records are messy. Some depositions were taken under torture, hardly reliable. The number of victims ranges wildly. The most sensational claim of 600 girls likely came from a servant eager to appease interrogators. Some scholars argue she may have killed dozens, not hundreds. Others claim she was framed by powerful nobles who envied her lands and wealth. A chilling possibility. What if she wasn't guilty at all? What if the so-called witnesses were coerced? What if the bloodbaths were inventions by political rivals eager to erase a strong, wealthy widow who refused to remarry? It's a question that lingers to this day. But whether monster or martyr, one fact is undeniable. Her reputation as a blood-drenched queen eclipsed everything else. The political fallout, her downfall had ripple effects across Europe. Her lands were seized, her children's inheritance contested, her dynasty's prestige shattered. The once great family name was whispered with contempt. No marriage alliances wanted it. No crown desired it. It's a stark reminder that a single scandal could topple centuries of noble power. One person's sins, or even just rumors of sin, could reshape politics for generations. The obsession with youth. But perhaps the most haunting legacy is the obsession that drove her. Think about it. For royalty, appearance was power. Wrinkles meant weakness. Aging meant vulnerability. In a court where beauty was currency, she believed blood was her elixir. That youth could be bottled, stolen, consumed. In many ways, her story is not so different from today. We may not bathe in blood, but billionaires chase immortality. Celebrities undergo endless surgeries. Scientists harvest cells to prolong life. The Queen's madness was extreme, grotesque, but the fear behind it, the fear of aging, of fading, of becoming irrelevant, that fear is eternal. Sightings and superstition. Long after her death, people swore she lingered. A soldier claimed he saw her ghost wandering the castle halls, her gown dripping crimson. Villagers insisted the soil around the castle turned red after storms, as if the earth itself bled. Travellers avoided the road at night, fearing her carriage would appear, pulled not by horses, but by pale, faceless girls. And in some remote villages, even into the 19th century, people whispered her name in hushed tones, as though speaking it aloud might summon her. The Queen had become more than a woman. She had become a curse. The final revelation, but let's return to those scraps of parchment found beside her corpse. Most were illegible, smudged, half-eaten by rats. But a few lines survive. One in particular stands out. If youth is in blood, then I am eternal. If blood is life, then I am life itself. You will never kill me. You will never forget me. And she was right. 400 years later, we still speak her name, still tell her story, still shudder at her legend. Reflection. So, what do we learn from the Blood Queen? We learn that unchecked power breeds monsters, that vanity can spiral into cruelty, that fear of time can drive people to madness. But more than that, we learn that history is fragile, a mix of truth and rumor, a balance of fact and legend. Perhaps she really did bathe in blood. Perhaps she was only guilty of being a powerful woman in a world that feared her. Either way, her story has survived, and survival, in its own way, is a form of immortality.